Thank you. And the next one on the agenda is, I'll just try, Spreydon-Cashmere, Carolyn Potter. Oh, and we've got Melanie as well. Good morning.
Kia ora tātou. It's a good thing Mel's here today in case I go off on a coughing fit. I feel like I will. Just before we start, I just wanted to mention Addington Net. Addington Net was one of the metro organisations that lost the most funding, and our board, all our board except one person, went to the annual general meeting the other night, and they've got a very smart leadership team, and we are hoping that we can help them resolve some of their funding issues created by the drop in funding from the council, and we're hoping that we'll be able to be more optimistic about their future than they were for a day or two after the funding was announced.
Right, yep. And yesterday, Carolyn and I met with, this is about a different thing but related to our long-term plan. So we met with some Hallsville residents from the Hallsville Residents Association, and it was around the Lincoln Road widening that's obviously been in the long-term plan for quite a while and has sort of been delayed. And our board has continuously opposed spending any money on that part between Curlitz and Wrights, and we will continue to do so. But what they talked to us about was how they're concerned about how in Hallsville that it's growing or will grow, they see by the size of Gisborne, so 30,000 people, and how to get all those people into town, or numbers of people down Lincoln Road. Now they were not necessarily supportive of 4 laning, because they say that they're not road and transport engineers, they are Hallsville residents. But they're also looking towards the future. So they're not necessarily in support of it, as far as I could tell. They just want transport solutions that will work for them. We were talking buses, we were talking trams, we were talking the future. So it's just something that we're wanting to put on your radar, and that also that they are planning to go to the Hallsville Hornby Riccarton Community Board to give a deputation, and then to ask for our boards to actually work together to discuss this, because we have to obviously advocate for the residents of Addington. That will always be our priority, but I'm just giving you a heads up.
Yeah. And finally, before we start the pictures, on Friday I'm going to West Spreydon School, where they've got a formal opening of their Get Gear.
Give Gear,
Get Great. Which is a program that we've introduced about trying to get sports gear out of people's wardrobes and into the kids' hands, because the cost of children going to sports activities is enormous. The membership of tennis clubs for young people, for instance, is $240 a year. This is just kind of cost that people can't afford. Swimming lessons are $148 a term, that kind of thing. So we're trying to introduce this gear swap so that we can get that new gear, old gear that's still good, and shoes, sports shoes, out of people's wardrobes and into other people's hands. And so we're putting bins in crucial places, including schools, and I'm going along and doing the opening. I'm hoping to dress up or look like an idiot, because if the kids see someone with my hair colour coming, they'll think they're an oldie is coming to see them. They wouldn't be true, all right. So starting on our pictures. There we go. Oh, it's not a great picture, but this is Paper Plus Barrington, who have been so proactive in supporting our and they also give 10% off for old people. They've been so proactive in supporting the community board and being really positive about interacting with us. Just for example, they gave prizes for our awards, community awards ceremony. They gave us prizes, but they gave us an extra prize, which was Jake's autobiography about his experience of surviving cancer. Can anybody remember Jake's surname?
Oh,
Bailey, that's it.
Yeah.
They gave us Jake's memoir of surviving cancer for our youth award as well as an additional prize. And here's their window, and it's not clear, I know, but it's for Neighbourhood Week, and it's got good traffic and good interaction with the community because it's a fun window. And I just wanted to say local community initiative. Vista Place Huntsbury, we've been consulting with them, and you can see the kind of thing we want to put up. The police have found intervening on Vista Place almost impossible. They haven't got their cars to be sitting up there all day and all night. They can't get up there quick enough to catch anybody doing anything. So we held a meeting with the residents, as I think I told you, and now they're consulting on the sign which says no stopping from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. except for owners, occupiers and their bona fide visitors. And that's closed now, so we're waiting to see the result of that. And you can see over the page where it's all at. Raupaki Road and Erefon Terrace. This is one of those places with loos where a loo is needed. And it's really hard for staff to put up loos and watch them being vandalised and then putting them up again and then watching them being vandalised. But this issue at this time was the narrow street with very high parking demand. It's taken a long time, this, because there's a fallout with other streets. If you put in solid parking, no parking on Raupaki, then you've got to think about Vernon Terrace, and then you've got to think about the next terrace and so on. And it's taken a long time to get where we are on this issue. But the reason why I was thinking about this was the other thing you see on Raupaki Road is carefully picked up dog poo in plastic bags delicately placed on this road before they get into their cars. And the next one is the Summit Road. Oh, I'm on the Summit Road as well. The Summit Road consultation's been out. The figures are very high on the response. Lots of people feel an ownership of the Summit Road and would like still to have access 24/7 and have said so, and for various reasons. And so the outcome of this will be interesting and won't resolve all of the issues at hand, but is an attempt to see if we can maintain some kind of civility on the length and breadth of the Summit Road.
So up here is a picture basically next to the South Library where the Beckenham Service Centre is the old pump station and the which is circled in red, and there's also the distribution centre to the left of it in that photo. So the old pump station site, so we've put this in our long-term plan as well. So that pump site, we hadn't really been thinking a lot about it, but we had some residents from the community come along and suggest to us that maybe we could use that site, or they could use that site as a community space for a farmer's market, as well as lots of other things that we could do. There's a bike sort of BMX track just to the right of that circle there, which is there at the moment, and of course that whole site runs, like our library does, runs right next to the Heathcote River, which of course has the problems of flooding plus the mid Heathcote linear plan around it. So when we asked could we use the distribution centre site for potentially for a farmer's market, the first response back we had was, well, no, we can't because of the mid Heathcote linear plan, but now we've been told that actually it's not inconsistent with it, so that's something that our board is very keen to pursue, to have that space as a community space, and also to be looking at the distribution centre and how we could make the most use of that, I suppose, for the community, and also I guess thinking ahead as well to when the repairs of the South Library happen too. So that's why we've put that in our long-term plan as one of our top priorities for you to consider. Oh, and here's a second picture of that's it there from the road, that goes along by the library.
That's me. This is Barrington Mall entrance. This is the bane of our lives in many respects and was the top priority in our long-term plan, and it was agreed to for this financial year. It's very complicated and it's hard to figure the pedestrian crossing to the Spreydon Library, which is just there in the upper left-hand corner, and as well as providing egress from the Barrington Mall car park, and access for pedestrians along that footpath and people with disability. It's not as easy as it looks, but we're looking to can the right-hand turn out of Barrington Mall, and we're hoping to get it done this year. We've got a great traffic engineer. Oh, that's what I forgot to mention. On the Get Gear thing, Emma Pavey is our staff member who is relentless in pursuing some of the projects that we've got, and I just wanted to mention her name with regards to the Get Gear, Get Great.
Yeah.
I never get it right. That project that Emma Pavey is leading on this project, John Dorr is our traffic engineer, and he has done a great job in catching us up on our traffic engineering, and I'm sure he'll do great on this as well.
And just with this, because the Spreydon Library is right there, because we've recently had two of the librarians I've seen from the Spreydon Library going to community meetings. They're trying to up people come to different things like seed swaps and various things, but I asked them about, do you look over there when people cross that crossing there, and he said that the office looks straight down over it, and it's really scary to sit there and to watch people nearly get hit every day. So that was some nice anecdotal evidence, I suppose, from council staff. So this image is obviously of the flooding around the Pauaho Heathcote River. There was a workshop with the public way back in May, and that was really great to sort of explain to the people who have been flooded multiple times along that stretch, sort of where the council was at that point. And then of course we had the workshop the one in here recently, where the drainage staff and Peter Christensen and Keith Davidson, isn't it? So they talked about their plans, and after that flooding that's happened most recently, and we had 17 people that were flooded over their floor level, who had obviously felt like they'd been forgotten compared to Flockton Basin and the people out in the South Shore area. So we were really, really happy with, everyone always is when they do their presentations. They're always incredible. They put their information together so succinctly and so clearly. So we're really pleased to hear that there's the idea of purchasing 30 of those properties, and then the plans for the dredging and obviously the retention basins as well. Alongside this, though, is just recently, over the weekend, there's been, because there's other areas that are flooded, not over the floor, but in Hoon Hay, which is close to where I live, and my garage does get flooded each time. But then there's Marion Place in Copenhagen, Marion Street in Copenhagen Place that regularly get flooded very, very badly. And there was also Weir Place, which is quite close to the Heathcote River, between Hoon Hay Road and the Heathcote River. And those people are starting to want to have their voices heard, let's put it that way. So they've had a meeting with the local MP over the weekend, and we're going to hear more from them. So it will be something to be thinking about, because I didn't mention about it previously, and they haven't come to our board as such yet, but I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but it's something that we need to think about, because they do get flooded every single time there's a heavy rain, and even on my street we do get a bit of flooding, but every time. So there's other areas that are sort of adjacent in between, the Henderson's area and the Heathcote River that do get regularly flooded too. So I thought I'd say,
watch the space.
Watch the space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Phil.
Look, thank you, Carol and Melanie. It's a very full report, and I think some of those issues are big ones. And I just want to refer to, for example, to Lincoln Road, which you referred to, and I think your reference, Carolyn, to having discussions around that issue is important, because the challenge that we have as council, of course, is that the bus part, the public transport part, which is a metropolitan planning matter, as well through the Joint Public Transport Committee. We have to make sure that we get that right. I think there probably is a parallel with the challenges of Riccarton Road, actually. So I'm pleased that both the both boards are having discussions around that too. That's important. The only other thing I wanted to mention is to underline the reference that Carolyn made to Addington Net. I was also at the meeting, as Carolyn indicated, and you know, that little organisation which became Metropolitan, in fact, has 28 volunteers working with them. So that's a sign that, you know, there are a lot of great organisations that we need to make sure we continue to support.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to move the report.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Just also, it's an interesting thing that with Rapaki Track, that, and it comes to, I guess, self-responsibility. People will travel somewhere to go and get fit. But if wherever you go, whether it's Raupaki, Huntsbury, wherever you go, maybe just think a wee bit about where you're parking, because it does seem ridiculous that you travel across town to try and get a car park as close as you can to the place where you're going to walk for 5 or 6 miles, where if you actually thought about the community you're entering, you know, just park a bit further away, and it's ironic, but you know, that's life. And I just also reiterate about the flooding. That is the number one thing for us at the moment. It is absolutely heartbreaking for those families, and we are coming, seeing them, etc.
Yeah.
And thanks to the staff who are working on it.
Listening to the rain on the roof must terrify a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, we won't even go there in public.
No, it does. I mean, and sorry, I know you've got a name.
Thank you for the work that you're doing with the sports gear too. I think that's fantastic that you are you've recognised that that's a barrier for young people, and you are have created a really great idea and project to address that. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Glenn?
Thank you. I'm just sorry. Just kind of Google climate change conferences Christchurch, and there's the odd kind of sporadic event that's been here and there. And I just wonder, you see in some of these reports without planning, whether we as a council, do we need to look at hosting something like that? I think we really need to try and be proactive in a single.
Sorry, about
climate change. I mean, in all these reports, there's 3 of flooding and.
Yeah, but that's.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance that there might be, depending on what happens, a city summit on climate change.
Yeah. I think we need it.
We would appreciate that, because we think that a considered discussion with our community outside of the emergencies that we have would be great.
I mean, I think, you know, the hardest thing in this area is that there was such a massive impact after the earthquakes that areas that were already exposed have been made further exposed, and it has been a matter of priorities. And we've set the priority at Flockton because, I mean, it was way more than 17 floor levels that were threatened in that regard. And I mean, you know, it's really hard to talk about priorities when people's floor levels have been breached. And in some areas it will only get worse, which is why we have to consider all of the options. And we do have criteria around buying out, but it's still a process to go through, and you know, it's something that the Land Drainage Recovery Program's been working on, and they will report back through the ITI committee to the council. So, you know, there is nothing that you've said that is a surprise to me. It is a major concern, and it will remain. That it is the next priority, the Heathcote River. So, no question about that.
Notwithstanding the absolute certainty of climate change, in my view, Peter Christensen showed a photograph of St Martin's in 1941 flooded. But the difference is the houses are there now.
Yes, and look, if you actually look at things like the Port Hills fire, there was a fire started virtually in the same place back at, what was it, 40 years ago or 30 years ago? 30 years ago. I met one of the guys that was a firefighter on that fire. There was no housing that was threatened by it. When we make these development decisions, and this is one of the things that I feel passionately about, one of the lessons learned is that we have to look at land use pattern decisions that were made prior to the earthquakes, because there were decisions that were made after the early 90s report, there were decisions made despite the risks around liquefaction and lateral spread being perfectly well known. And it's all very well to quietly, you know, to sort of pass it off and saying, well, the Environment Court overturned them. That isn't the case with all of them. In fact, the Bexley subdivision, known as Pacific Park, went in because the council wanted to build all the way down to the river, and the environmentalists pushed back because they wanted to develop wetlands. So there was half a paragraph devoted to the known risk of liquefaction and nothing taken into account. So I want us to go back over those decisions. I actually don't think that red zoning should be an excuse not to look at what we got wrong in order to fix it for the future.
Exactly.
And there are areas of development. I don't think that some of the people who lived in the Port Hills knew that they were in a forest fire environment. I don't believe that they ever understood that, and we have to be much clearer about assisting communities to understand their risks. It is not something that we can do for communities, it's something communities must do with the expert support that we in the council can provide. But it's a joint effort, and it's not going to happen overnight. Yanni, I'm sorry, but we've got to the end. Thank you very much. Right, well, we've had it moved and seconded, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried, and I shall